Watch this.
They won't trust some staff to shelve books, but they want to trust others to decide when it's time to grab a gun. That's the argument some made against the bill being considered in committee, but that didn't stop it from advancing.
It's Schoolhouse Rocky, the tip off the block of your favorite Schoolhouse Rock.
A blast from the past. We're going back to the basics to help you know how things work at the Idaho State House. Because knowledge is power. Kind of like a pole barn piled high with pieces of malted past. And nobody appreciates cans like this Eagle Man. Okay, stop me if you've heard this before. A bill debated in a packed committee room with overwhelming opposition standing up to testify against it, yet it passes that committee with flying colors. 11-2, right along party lines. House Bill 415 is aimed at letting teachers and school staff carry concealed weapons on school grounds. Not allowed now, but those in favor believe it should be, statewide. But the bigger question revolves around whether that should be decided locally. For example, Garden Valley School District decided teachers with guns, well, that's how they want to handle school safety. Others, they have private security, and many are contracted with local police for officers on site, call them school resource officers. This bill, though, would mean local school districts could not stop a teacher or staff member from carrying a concealed weapon on campus, which, as Andrew Bartline found out, is too much for some and won't work for everyone.
The leading language on Wednesday's docket,
House Bill 415.
is to rework state statutes.
You want to keep doing it that way, fine.
In House.
I'm saying no.
State affairs.
I'm saying change. I'm not going to be a sheep at my school, and so I'm going to do something about it. And I think people want that. Nobody wants to be the end of that.
Representative Ted Hill sponsors the bill. It would allow Idaho teachers, staff, and volunteers to concealed carry at school.
This is a parents' issue. Parents want this. That's the key.
Just not
No, thank you.
these parents.
I hang my head in shame, and all of you should. And everyone in this room should as well.
There has been some testimony this session about not trusting librarians with books, but this trusts librarians with a Glock.
Please vote no on H415.
It's a testimony students in the room would echo.
Yep.
Had Eloisa Harper held the podium.
Students are the ones being affected by this, and I also think that it's important to note that teachers did not become teachers to shoot people. And having more guns in my school doesn't make me feel any safer, and I think I speak for students who have the same fear as me.
But Idaho's a strong two-way state.
You have to answer violence with violence. You can't sit back and passively hope it's going to be okay.
And Representative Gannon
Is there questions?
wants a two-way conversation.
Has the NRA got a survey of parents and those who deal with the schools on this subject, and would you be willing to share that with us?
Did you answer that, yes or no?
Thank you, Chairman. A survey was not necessary.
Meaning firsthand experience leading a school was left overlooked.
Exactly.
Mark Gee heads Middleton Schools.
We really felt like the local control and our local school board had the right information to make a decision for Middleton.
Current Idaho law grants school districts the power to regulate guns in schools as they see fit. In Middleton, they determined school resource officers just weren't enough.
Then at each of our elementary schools, we've got a security officer.
Contracted guns.
Next up will be Scott Brock.
On a highly trained team.
I own a company that provides armed security in school districts in the state of Idaho currently.
He has a 20-year Green Beret protecting a Middleton school right now. And if the bill becomes law, he fears it creates confusion.
My largest concern is identification. If we're at a school event where we have a ton of parents, and I have a ton of parents there that are carrying, and an incident takes place, there's going to be a lot of guns out. I need them to be able to identify my guys for their safety, and then my people need to be able to identify the concealed carriers. Same with law enforcement.
The difference being, Scott's guys are highly trained. He says more than your local police department, and far more than the teacher.
I will tell you that the enhanced carry class is the lowest common denominator. That's the lowest level of training. It's the entry-level training.
But that permit is all the training needed for a school staff member to carry under this bill. And any qualifying staff member could carry.
You can't override it. So this is going to be a statewide thing.
Stepping on local control. And districts who say, They never asked for it in the first place.
So why don't we let the school boards, who have been elected by the people, make those decisions? To me, that's the essence of local control and what we're trying to fight for in the first place.
No teacher under this bill would be forced to hold a concealed carry. It would be if you so choose to do. Again, the district couldn't stop you if it became law to allow that to happen in the district. There are some safeguards to this as well for civil action. So for example, Brian, if there's a threat that happens and a teacher doesn't act properly, like they freeze, for example, parents couldn't sue that teacher and say, you failed to protect my kid. So there's some safeguards in there as well. Also, they say it's cheaper. That contracted security out to Middleton. Okay. They say it's a higher level of training. I mean, these guys are like air marshal level training, right? Which I understand is remarkably difficult. And they can get 2.5 for the price of like 1 SRO.
Okay, so 2 things that stood out to me. One is that they didn't talk to school districts about this and parents to find out if this is necessary, the NRA lobbyist. Secondly, it includes volunteers. Like a volunteer who shows up like, I'm gonna go help my kid's class read, I could be carrying a gun.
That was part of the conversation, is what level of volunteer? Somebody holding a flag on the crosswalk, someone who's contracted with the district. It seems the language, there's a disagreement between lawmakers.
And yet it passes 11-2, so we'll see what happens on the House floor with that. Okay, thanks, Andrew. So we are a few weeks into the session already, and by now you've likely heard us say things like, RSs, do pass recommendations, amending order, those kind of things. So you likely have questions about what those might mean and how it all works down at the State House, and that's why Joe's here to help explain it.
I'm here, yes. Let's jump into a little bit of legislative fun. All right, well, we get a lot of great questions about how to follow the legislature, like how does a bill become a law? So we thought we'd walk you through it.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and if they vote for me on Capitol Hill.
Remember that guy? Yeah, he was really helpful to teach us about how a bill becomes, a law in Congress. But this is kind of Washington, D.C. focused, and we want to talk about, how a bill's made in Idaho. Sans music for now. We will get to the musical portion of that. But how does an idea become a law here in the Gem State? First step, an idea is introduced as draft legislation, and it's referred to as an RS, or a routing slip. It begins in either the House or Senate in one of the more than a dozen committees. If the committee votes yes to print the RS, it then becomes a bill, an official bill. And it quickly heads out for assignment in the full chamber it started at the committee level in, so the House or the Senate. From the chamber floor, the bill is then referred to a committee, maybe the one it came from originally, for review. If it's introduced in the House, it's assigned to a House committee, one that fits. So education bills, those would go to the Education Committee. And that committee can do a lot of things. They can recommend amendments, approve the bill, kill the bill outright, or put it in a drawer where it may never be recalled. Sometimes no action is taken, and that is a pointed decision. Committees, they also hold public testimony before their final votes. If the committee does approve the bill, it goes to the full House or Senate for debate and voting after it's read a few times. A simple majority vote is needed to pass the bill. And if the bill passes in the first chamber, then it goes across the Capitol to the other chamber to follow the exact same process, all over again. So the legislation is transmitted across the Capitol and assigned a committee in the opposite chamber it came from. The other chamber, House or Senate, they repeat the process. They have their committee review, floor debate and voting, and if amendments were added in the second chamber, well, the original chamber, they have to agree with them. So it could simply be sent back to the House to vote on those changes. But this is where you can see some ping-ponging back and forth between the two houses if they can't come to an agreement. If the bill does pass both chambers in identical form, it goes to the governor. The governor can sign that bill into law, he could veto it or reject it, or he can take no action. If the governor vetoes it, the legislature, they can override or undo the veto if 2/3 of them vote to do it. If the governor signs the bill or takes no action, well, that bill becomes an Idaho state law. It's assigned a chapter number, and it is printed into Idaho code. Thank you to Logan Smith, by the way, for helping to walk us through that. That'll be evergreen. And Brian, there are some exceptions to all of that. One that just sticks out at the top of my head. The Joint Finance and Appropriation Committee, JFAC, the Budgeting Committee. It's in the word, it's joint. So the two committees, the House and the Senate Committee, they're actually combined just into one. From there, though, it would go to the House. They got to do all the House business. Then it can go straight over to the Senate to do the Senate business. And that's where you get some of the ping-ponging on agreeing on legislation.
You promised more music.
Yes, look, I'm telling you, and producer Katie, I'm telling you this too, live on TV, so now we can't go back. We want to do an Idaho version of Schoolhouse Rock. I'm musically super gifted, clearly, because I work here. So we'll find out.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
You know he promised, so we'll see if we get to it. All right, thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
All right, it's time for viewer questions. We get them almost every day, but sometimes we just don't have the time or the information to answer them at the end of the show. So every once in a while, we just take some time to do just that, to answer them. So today we're focused on a few stories we shared this week, like the results of the 9th annual Boise State Public Policy Survey, the one which showed for the first time ever most people surveyed feel the state is headed in the wrong direction. Larry wants to know, well, how were the people chosen for the BSU Public Policy Survey? Well, for the answer, we went straight to the source. Dr. Matthew May with Boise State's School of Public Service and research scholar with the Idaho Policy Institute. He told us respondents, they were randomly selected, like every 5th or 10th name in their catalog of names. BSU Policy Survey had 40% of responses come from an online panel, he told us, 25% from a landline interview, another 25% from anyone who answered their cell phone and took the survey, and the remaining 10%, well, they got their information via text message. So we were told there were quotas for age, gender, and county where they live, which was weighted a bit to make sure there was an accurate geographical representation, which is how Dr. May told us they got answers from each of Idaho's 44 counties. But when broken down by media market, which is what they decided to do, they said 45% of those answers came from the Boise market, 22% came from the Spokane area, like Coeur d'Alene, 21% from Idaho Falls market, 10% from Twin Falls, and 1% from the Salt Lake City media market area that kind of gets that right corner of the state. So there you go. So maybe next November, when you see a random number pop up on your cell phone, answer it, and you could be one of the randomly selected people to participate in the 2025 Public Policy Survey. Next question. Deborah wants to know, what happens to the $50,000 that the candidates paid to Idaho Republican Party, but they've now dropped from the race? Does Idaho refund the money? Well, no, that money is now property of the Idaho GOP. They could, however, well, at least Donald Trump or Nikki Haley or Ryan Binkley, they could come to Idaho, hold a public campaign event, and they get half of that filing fee back. But if they don't, or they just drop out of the race like 3 of them already have, well, according to the Idaho GOP caucus rules, all other filing fees are non-refundable, regardless of the candidate's actual participation in the Idaho Republican Presidential Caucus or whether the candidate withdraws from contention prior to the Republican Presidential Caucus here in Idaho. As for what happens with that $300,000 that those 6 have already chipped in, half of it, that'd be $150,000, that's going to be sent to the 44 county central committees to help cover the cost of the caucuses in their area. The rest, the other $150,000, it's going to be kept in the coffers of the Idaho GOP. Okay, so next question, and finally, actually these are a couple of questions regarding the House Bill 400, the one which would change all references of fetus in Idaho code to preborn child because, according to the bill's sponsor and self-proclaimed word girl, that'd be Representative Julianne Young, it's important to communicate with language everybody understands. Well, Jen and Susan, they want to understand the financial benefits of having a, quote, preborn child. Would that mean child support would start about 9 weeks of pregnancy? Or if it's a child before birth, is it also a tax deduction? Well, maybe to answer Jen's question, and no to answer Sue's, at least not yet. I mean, child support, that can basically start at any time, I guess, because that's usually an agreement between the parents of the child. But a tax deduction for a child, or the child tax credit, that is a governmental thing, an Internal Revenue Service thing. Those rules are a bit stricter. First, the child tax credit is a deduction you can claim, which right now is worth up to about $2,000 per qualifying child under the age of 17, depending on your income. You make less than $200K, you're likely to get all of that per kid. But in order to claim a child tax credit on your taxes, your child needs a Social Security number, which means your child has to be issued a certificate of live birth during the tax year. So born, not preborn. However, you might be shocked to learn there has been a congressional push to make it so parents can claim a tax credit for a child in utero. Senator Steve Daines from Montana has been trying this since 2019, and there's even a version in the House of this session of Congress, but so far neither bill has really gone very far. So as of now, no tax credit for fetuses or preborn children, but some members of Congress, they could be working on it. Remember, if you have any questions about anything we talk about here on the 208, please send them our way at any time. We'll take them over email, over voicemail, social media, and of course, text message. And maybe you missed us answering your question on another show. Good to remember, all of our 208 episodes are available to watch on the KTVB YouTube pages and KTVB+. Do you like beer? Not so much the beverage, but the container it comes in. Well, probably not as much as this man from Eagle, who kicked his can across the line separating hobby and obsession years ago. I'm sure you've collected a few comments for us today. How about you text them to us at 208-321-5614. Always include your name and the hashtag the 208. That way we know who it's from and who we can say it's from at the end of the show. That is, if they're good, clean, and concise. Well, today, January 24th, is a national holiday. It's National Beer Can Appreciation Day. Beer Can Appreciation Day, because today, in 1935, is the day beer first became available in just little kegs. They called them cans. Longtime viewers might be familiar with an Eagle man who really appreciates beer cans like no other Idahoan. But if you don't know, allow us to introduce you to the Beer Can Man in today's 208 Redial. Out back, behind his rather modest house in Eagle, Joe Prynn, a modest man.
There was a pole barn here, so I kind of just enclosed it.
With a modest affinity for malted beverages.
Oh yeah, just in case I forget about this.
Has a rather
welcome to Beervana
immodest collection in his outbuilding.
See, I told you you'd say that.
Joe says he's stockpiled and stacked somewhere near 11,000 beer cans. That's a lot of lagers, an abundance of ales, and a Schlitz load of stouts.
That wall ends at C. Oh yeah, it keeps going.
There's another room.
It keeps going.
Sure, the collection is impressive, but so is the presentation.
It's the only way to keep track of it. Alphabetical, chronological, by brand and brewery.
And when he ran out of wall space, he went to the rafters.
Everything's on wheels.
And then roll around racks. Joe says he has a can from every state in the Union.
Oh yeah, definitely.
From A1 to Zodiac, even all the Idaho cans.
Edge Brewing, McCall Brewing, Slanted Rock.
He can go from generic to almost there to novelty TV cans.
Let's see, JR.
Even the every collector has to have Billy beer.
Yes.
The first beer can? Yeah, he's got that too.
Kruger's Cream Ale. That was the one that the can companies, they talked this brewery into trying this in 1935, and it was a tremendous success.
Kinda like Joe.
Yeah.
Since he started this quest for Metal Majesty back in the 70s.
Up until some that I added yesterday.
You added some yesterday?
Yeah, some brand new ones.
He admits he has a problem.
Yeah, but it's manageable at this time.
Joe knows of no one else in Idaho with this kind of collection.
I think I can probably claim that title, but I don't know if it's one to be proud of.
But there are thousands more around the country. They even have their own club and monthly magazine, of which Joe is the editor. Here they track auction prices of recent tin treasures.
That can sold for $37,000. That one was $37,000. This one was $35,000.
Joe also insists while all 11,000 of these vessels are vacant, he didn't drain them all.
I've had my fair share of them. I did. Can't you tell? I've had my fair share of them.
It said Colt 45 works every time, but Joe says he's worked about as many as he can into this old barn.
I'm done now. This is it.
This is not going to get bigger.
This is it. My goldfish bowl can't get any bigger.
A bowl, Joe says, is only worth its weight in aluminum, but if measured in memories, priceless.
There's a story behind every one of these.
Well, apparently his goldfish bowl did get a little bit bigger. After selling his collection back in the 80s one time to help pay the rent and keeping just two so he could restart the collection, which he obviously did, he told us he was going to start getting rid of them back in 2018 when we talked to him, since his kids didn't want the collection. But he hasn't. In fact, at one point, he added a lot more. In 2021, Joe ran the can collection up to 16,000, which is a lot less these days. He's down to about 9,000, just 9,000. And you know what? You can see some of them today. No better way to appreciate Beer Can Appreciation Day, as Joe is helping to open, or I guess celebrate this day, at the new Gem State Brewing in Eagle by showing off his cans.
Beer's kind of a strange brew, pardon the pun. So I set up this display. It's a way of promoting our hobby, meeting some new people, showing a little bit of historical education. I started collecting when I was about probably 14 or 15 years old. We got to look back to the mid-70s, early 70s. This was a huge hobby. It took the nation by storm. A lot of people collected beer cans. This is the one that started it all. In 1935, on this day, this beer was first sold to the public in Richmond, Virginia as a test market, and it was very successful. This is the day that the very first beer was ever put into cans and sold to the public on January 24th, 1935. Breweriana is the name for collecting the things that come from breweries.
Hi, Brian.
Doesn't have to be just cans.
Brian and I go back a ways.
There's people that collect bottles or trays or neon. So these are Idaho's only cone top beer cans. It's also called National Beer Can Day. It gives us a reason to talk about beer cans.
All right, a lot of comments today on the possibility of allowing teachers, staff, and even volunteers to carry guns onto school campuses in Idaho. Veteran of 20 years, teacher 20 years, I should say. If the gun bill passes, I'd be looking for another career. It's no way, it's not okay in any way, in any level. I feel teachers should not be armed. I think the best thing is trained resource officers. Fortunately, Idaho has had only one school shooting since 2000 in Rigby. That's from Scott. When I taught for 26 years in Idaho schools, I was employed to teach kids, not to provide security from outside terrorist attacks. What is more important to Idaho parents, the safety of your children or less tax dollars because you are too cheap to hire qualified professional security, says Steve. That's kind of the issue, is whether or not some of these rural schools, smaller school districts, can afford to pay for outside security. We'll see where this bill goes, and we'll see you tomorrow.